If an engine is legal when measured cold, but illegal when running on the track, should it be allowed? What if that trick gives the team up to 15 horsepower advantage? What if Ferrari doesn't use it, but Mercedes and Red Bull do? Along with Honda and Audi, which also found themselves completely left out of this innovative interpretation, Ferrari lodged a formal protest with the FIA. The argument was legally clear. Article C 1.5 states that cars must comply with the regulations at all times during a competition. For Ferrari, this means that it is not enough to be legal in the previous static tests. If an engine exceeds the 16:1 compression limit on the track, even if it does so through natural thermal means, then it is violating that rule. In parallel, the technical leadership of the Scuderia met to evaluate its situation. And that's where the real fracture arose. Because not everyone within the team was aligned. Some more conservative sectors, led by the old guard of Italian engineers, defended the position of maintaining the integrity of the original design of the SF26. For them, modifying the engine now would be a moral surrender, the wrong message to both their employees and their fans. Ferrari's honor is not in technical cheating, but in winning by respecting the rules. But on the other side were the pragmatists. International engineers, many of them signed in recent years from Mercedes, Red Bull, or even NASA, who warned of the real danger. If Mercedes and Red Bull manage to freeze the homologation of their engines with that structural advantage, Ferrari will not be able to compete for the next 4 years. Because the new regulations limit the development of power units. Whatever is approved now will remain practically unchanged until 2030. And that is where the internal dilemma begins. Ferrari is faced with an impossible decision. Preserve its values and be defeated, or adapt, apply its own version of the thermal trick and risk its credibility. It is the biggest crossroads they have faced since the hybrid era in 2014. Tensions escalated quickly within the team. There were disagreements between departments. Emergency technical meetings were called. Some senior officials even called for an ethics review by the Scuderia's internal committee. Ultimately, the debate was more philosophical than technical. What does it mean to be Ferrari in the modern era? Is purity of design more important than victory? Is a clean title or a fair battle worth more even if you lose? Meanwhile, Honda and Audi engineers, less committed to historical symbolism, pressed the FIA with a more frontal approach. They argued that allowing these types of thermal technologies not only distorts the spirit of the competition, but also opens the door to a cascade of gray innovations. Because if this technique is legal, what stops other teams from modifying chambers, pistons, or fuels with similar effects? The situation became even more tense when Mercedes leaked that its design had been presented and accepted by the FIA months ago. This revelation not only generated disbelief in Ferrari, but a sense of betrayal. Because if the FIA had already endorsed this concept, why wasn't it informed to all manufacturers? Why was a covert structural advantage allowed, with such great consequences for the competitive balance? And here politics comes into play. The FIA is caught between two equally strong legal interpretations. On the one hand, it has pre-approval of a technology that does not literally violate the text. On the other hand, there are demands from several manufacturers, including Ferrari, who are clamoring for an urgent correction before the start of the season. With the homologation date approaching and private tests just around the corner, time becomes a lethal factor. Every day that passes without resolution is a missed opportunity to adjust designs, reconfigure materials, and redo reliability calculations. Ferrari, by then, had already commissioned independent studies with external suppliers to evaluate the feasibility of replicating the thermal expansion system. But the reports were clear. Any attempt at this point would jeopardize the overall reliability of the SF26. It's not just about implementing the technology, it's validating it, testing it, and ensuring that it will not compromise long-term performance. Thus, caught between ethics, politics, and technical desperation, Ferrari faces one of the most decisive moments in its recent history. A moment in which your decisions will not only define your competitiveness on the track, but your identity as a team. The future of the SF26 engine is at stake, and with it, Ferrari's competitive future for the next 4 years. It's not an exaggeration. Under the new 2026 regulations, power units will be subject to an early homologation regime with almost zero room for evolution. What each manufacturer presents in these months will, in essence, be what they will use throughout the regulatory cycle until 2030. That is why this controversy with thermal expansion is not a simple technical matter. It is an early sentence of success or failure. The SF26 engine, as it has been designed, complies with the regulations from a more literal, more orthodox, more transparent interpretation. Its maximum compression ratio remains at 16:1 both cold and hot. Ferrari opted for a solid, reliable architecture, focused on comprehensive energy efficiency. This includes an optimized synergy between the thermal part and the electric part of the powertrain, especially important in 2026, when power will be split 50-50 between internal combustion and electric power. But the problem is that this political correctness, this adherence to clean regulations, can cost Ferrari up to 15 horsepower. And that, translated on the track, means losing between 3 and 4 tenths per lap. What does this mean on a 24-race calendar? It means systematically starting in the second or third row. It means not being able to fight as equals with Mercedes or Red Bull, especially in circuits where power is decisive like Monza, Jeddah, or Spa. However, the true impact is not measured only in top speed. The most worrying thing for Ferrari is consumption efficiency. Because by increasing the compression ratio through that thermal expansion, rivals not only make more power, they can also extract that power using less fuel. This translates into lighter cars at the start of the race, with lower fuel loads, better traction, and less tire degradation. It's a double advantage, more power and less weight. And in a context where every kilogram counts, that can make a difference in any scenario, even in technical or urban circuits where the engine is not the only dominant factor. Thermal efficiency is the holy grail of modern engines. In the hybrid era, and even more so in 2026, performance is no longer measured just by horsepower, but by how much you do with each drop of fuel. And this is where Mercedes and Red Bull's solution becomes especially lethal. It allows performance to be maintained without compromising autonomy. In other words, they run faster, for longer, and with fewer resources. For Ferrari, this new paradigm represents an existential threat. If they do not find a technical solution, or if the FIA does not invalidate the rival interpretation, the SF26 will be doomed from birth. And even worse, they will not have the tools to reverse the situation later. The regulations are inflexible. Engine approvals, once approved, are frozen except for reliability issues. They may not modify the design to improve performance without justified cause. They will be stuck with an engine that, while legal, will be inherently inferior. Therefore, internal pressure at Ferrari is growing. Some engineers have already proposed palliative measures, trying an intermediate version of the design, with materials that offer slight thermal expansion without compromising reliability. Others suggest a total redesign, although that would mean starting from scratch in the middle of the homologation process, with the risk of not arriving on time. There has even been talk of negotiating directly with the FIA to obtain a deadline extension in case the final ruling on the legality of the rival trick favors those who use it. And meanwhile, Mercedes and Red Bull wait. They know that, if the legality of their solution is confirmed, they will have in their hands the most important technical advantage since the introduction of V6 hybrids in 2014. An advantage that cannot be matched on the track. An advantage that will force Ferrari not only to improve, but to reinvent itself. Thus, the fate of Ferrari and its SF26 does not depend exclusively on its engineering talent. It now depends on a political decision, on a legal interpretation, on a technical meeting that can change history. Because if the FIA validates this thermal interpretation of the regulations, it will not only be defining who wins in 2026. It will be setting a precedent that will change the way Formula One is designed, competed, and interpreted. And in that context, the question is inevitable. Is Ferrari prepared to adapt to this new reality, or will it be, once again, trapped by its own principles? Formula One has always been a battleground between human talent and technical astuteness. But there are times when that battle becomes a silent war of interpretations, loopholes, and regulatory ambiguity. The scandal surrounding the thermal trick in 2026 engines is not simply a technical dispute. It is a manifestation of what F1 represents at its core. A constant struggle between innovation and equity, between what is possible to do and what should be done. Mercedes and Red Bull have pushed the regulations to their limits, and perhaps even a little further, with a move that could mark a new era of domination. Ferrari, for its part, faces the type of dilemma that has defined its recent history: remain faithful to its principles, or adapt to the game of power and ambiguity that today defines the category. The most ironic thing of all is that, in a sense, everyone is right. Mercedes and Red Bull operate within the permitted technical margins. Ferrari, Honda, and Audi defend the moral coherence of the regulations, seeking to protect the spirit of the sport. And the FIA, in the middle, tries to impose order on a chaos that they themselves helped create. And at that crossroads, F1 as a spectacle is in a unique position. Because this controversy is not a simple detail between engineers. It is a story of power, of long-term vision, of divided loyalties, and of a competition that, even before it begins, is already defined by those who best knew how to interpret the shadows of the regulations. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.